Disney CFO confirmed recently that Disney is planning to begin using a dynamic pricing model for theme park tickets. What is that exactly? We're going to try to explain what that means, where it's being done already, why it looks familiar, and why this is good business for Disney and maybe good for the consumer. Let's begin. Dynamic pricing. It means basically that the price is not fixed, that there's no flat structure to it. It can vary from day to day, from hour to hour. Now, that's kind of a new development. It also isn't for those of you who are familiar with, buying tickets already for Walt Disney World and even more so at Disneyland. We've already got something like that. We've already got a varied pricing schedule that goes from tier 0 to tier 7, which I'm sure you guys have heard us talk about this in the past, especially in our state of reports. Tier 0 being the lowest price, tier 6 being the highest price, and all variables in between. And those prices vary depending on what Disney perceives the demand to be for that day. However, that is a fixed calendar. In spite of the fact that it's varied, is a fixed calendar. You can go look it up right now, and you will know exactly what the price is going to be in January, March, October, December, whatever, and it will not change. It will never change. The dynamic pricing model is one that can change right now. They could say a certain price on their website, and then you come back an hour later and it could be a different price. And it's constantly fluctuating, constantly changing, and this is all being changed based on whatever the perceived demand is by some algorithm on the Disney website. The basic idea is that there is the algorithm has a floor and a ceiling. So the price will never get lower than the floor and it'll never exceed the ceiling, but it can change anywhere in between depending on demand. So let's just say they open up a date at the perceived floor for that particular date. By the way, they don't always start at the very bottom. They could start at a little bit step up from the bottom because they know it's going to be a busy day, December 25th, for example, or something like that. So there's this perceived bottom and a perceived top. And then as demand starts to make itself known, if they're getting more response, if they're getting more ticket sales, more things happening than expected, that's a sign that demand is rising, and they might, as the day becomes closer and closer to full capacity, let's say, they'll start raising the prices. Likewise, conversely, if they feel like there's demand is waning, if let's say if they set a floor or they set a dollar amount where they figured it would land and the demand is less, then the price might come down. That's less likely though, I think, especially when you consider that the algorithms are already pre-coded with a floor and a ceiling. So that's just kind of like the basic, the bare bones of it all. For those of us here in the States, that's a new concept. Well, not entirely new, which we're going to get to. But for those Disney Parks fans here, in the States, that is a new concept. But it's not new for Disney fans in general. Disneyland Paris has been doing this already for just about a year now. They started doing a program like this back in November of 24. And by the way, Disneyland Paris, often they are the guinea pigs for pricing models. I recall distinctly us doing a video about they're doing single-use lightning lane, or whatever they call it over there. They were the ones. That's where they tested single-use lightning lane, and that did eventually come to the parks. They tested, dynamic pricing at Disney Park or at Disneyland Paris. Apparently, everybody's fine with it. It's cool. So Disney's saying people have adjusted. They're okay. They figured it out. We're going to bring this to Disneyland or Walt Disney World. Now, Paris, what's in question here is going to be for data tickets. You can buy an undated ticket, and they can be used for any date, regardless of whatever the value is or the price of that ticket. But I think these cost more and are not part of or subject to the dynamic pricing model, so we won't check those. We'll check the data tickets. Those are the ones that will have the dynamic model. So we're going to go 1 day, 2 parks, and already you can see the scale there. That scale starts at $93 and goes up to $130, right? So that's the range of prices that you can see across all dates. You'll see, like, for example, that little blue right there in the middle between 102 and 111. That's for next week, starting on the November 24th through the 27th. The most expensive day is that purple one On the high end of the scale, that one is going for $135. We'll go into December, and you can see the holidays become a more volatile, a more pricier neighborhood. So what you're not seeing here is that low to high range, but let's just click on, let's just say Christmas Eve, $148, right? So we'll select that date. Tell me it's just one guest. And it's again, well, we're not really seeing it in action. we're not seeing the algorithm act, but they do tell you. Where is that? Here we go. That right in the middle there, the selected prices are applicable until the end of the 60-minute booking session. So once you open up the app, once you start the process, you have an hour to lock in whatever price is on there. That feels very dramatic. I must say, more dramatic than this process needs to be, because I'd be willing to guess, and this might be something that we get into later, more conversation, but I'd be willing to guess that price is not going to change very much. It may change, a couple days before the 24th. It may change on December 20th or something like that, but I don't think we're going to see any change in that. If I could sit here and watch this calendar for the next 6 hours, and I don't think we're going to see a change. But anyway, they're letting you know the selected prices are applicable until the end of the 60-minute booking session, subject to availability, etc. When the session expires, prices will be subject to variation again. So once I do this, I'll confirm my selection, and we're locked in at that point. Now, the price is locked, and we just have to move on through the process, creating an account if you don't already have one, and buying the ticket. Now, that's Disneyland Paris, and that was fairly seamless. Like I said, it would not even be present to the average guest that it was even happening, that there was a dynamic pricing situation happening, but that is happening just now. We went through that just now on the Disneyland Paris app. Now, I said this was probably new to Disney Park guests here in the States, but it's probably not new to guests in general. Essentially, what this model is doing or replicating is how we buy airline tickets today, and to some extent hotel reservations too, although those are a little bit more fixed than airline reservations. But airline reservations change constantly. I've bought a few recently, obviously, and I've noticed changes where I'm like, that's not the price I just saw a little bit ago. That's something that does change with regularity, and it's actually something that we predicted on this show, or I should say our co-host when we had our podcast back in the day, Ron Berner. He said that was he called this 3 years ago, I think it was. And I didn't disagree with him at the time, but I'm just like, man, that's pretty prescient. And Disney has basically said that's what we're doing. It's not exactly a 1-for-1. It's not exactly the same as what airlines do, but it's pretty darn close. They're trying to say it isn't because I think that people don't like it. There's a negative connotation. There's a negative, association with this pricing model with the airlines, because it's basically it's not consumer friendly. It's not pro-consumer, this pricing model. But if you've ever bought an airline ticket, and I've seen this, you want to buy that ticket as soon as possible because it's only going to go up. The closer you get to your date, your fly date, the higher that price gets. And I remember recently where I had purchased a ticket. I had purchased a round trip ticket, went to Florida. I was there and I'm like, you know what? I don't like my return time. I need to change my return time. And I looked into the app and it was like $300 more. It was, if I wanted to get a flight 3 hours earlier than I had scheduled, it was going to cost me another $300 because I was doing it the day before. And so I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. So let's get into that, because that begs the question, why does Disney want to do this? How is this good for Disney? And that's a perfect example. There's what I got here. There's four ways that this serves Disney's purposes in terms of making them more money. And that's really the bottom line, right? All four of these reasons are going to be to make Disney more money. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's obviously what their goal is. First is that they're going to want to get more money from high demand days. And that's exactly the same thing that we're doing now at Disneyland. Those tier 0 to tier 6. The tier 6 days are the most in demand days, December or whatever, holidays, etc. It's the same exact thing. They're just trying to maximize their opportunity to make more because demand is higher. People want it more. And if you want it more, then you are going to pay more. And that is literal capitalism. So for anybody who's like, Disney, that's literally capitalism, right? That's supply and demand. That's 101 straight out of the textbook. All right. The second thing it does, and again, this is very similar to what they're doing here at Disneyland. It forces guests to even out the demand. More guests are going to opt out. They're going to say no to that higher price because it's too much money. So they try to find a cheaper day somewhere else, a cheaper day that is cheaper because there is a perceived lack of demand by Disney for those days, and therefore they expect fewer people to show. They want to push people from the busier days into the less busy days in order to maximize their possibility. And whatever tickets they don't sell, let's say somebody chooses, I don't want to go to that park on that very busy day because the price is higher. They're going to make up for that by charging more. So, every guest that says no, they're going to get another $20 from this other guest for that date. So it does even out for them. They still win on even those busy days where people aren't showing up because the price is too high. Third, and this is kind of almost a holy grail type situation for businesses. It forces guests to commit earlier, to buy, to book, to reserve earlier than they might otherwise have done. You want to lock people in as soon as possible, as far into the future as possible, or far into the past, I guess, whatever the case may be. And they do this both, that's just tickets, not just tickets, but also for Lightning Lane and parking. You'll see on the website, they ask you, do you want to buy your Lightning Lane now? Do you want to pay for your parking now? By doing so, they've locked you in. You've booked it so that you can't change your mind. There could be the case when it comes to tickets where you put it off like, I'm not sure if I want to go that day. I'm not sure if I want to go. And then maybe 2 weeks later, you do decide, oh no, the price went up, right? You wouldn't have that situation if the price was fixed, if the price was flat. You could put off that decision until the very last minute. Likewise, if they try to commit you to Lightning Lane, buy your Lightning Lane now. But you could get to the park, if you don't ask them then, you get to the park and you haven't already purchased your Lightning, like, oh, no, the park's not that busy. I don't need it. But it's better for them to book you then so that whether or not you need it, you have it. And you're already locked into that $20, $25, $30. Same thing for parking, although parking is a little bit more typical. You're going to park, basically. You're going to pay for parking. And then finally, number 4, and this is kind of similar to number 1, it isolates the casual guest into those less busy days. And that's what Disney has done with Magic Key holders here, making it difficult. That's why it's harder to get reservations for Saturday and Sunday because they lock those days up. It's harder for us to get those Saturdays and Sundays. Therefore, we have to, if we want to go to Disneyland, we're going to have to find some way to go Monday through Friday. And this is the very same thing. Now, again, I keep making these correlations to Magic Keys, what we're experiencing here. It is very similar to the point where I think that you wouldn't even notice a difference. The only difference is, as I mentioned at the outset, is that where the Magic Key calendar is fixed for the whole year, you can see the calendar. There's 12 months of dates. You know exactly what it's going to be. That won't change. They've committed to it for a year. This calendar, this system can change tomorrow. That price can change tomorrow, and it will on those high demand days. So that's how it's good for Disney. What about guests? I mentioned that this isn't exactly a pro-consumer model. Matter of fact, I even asked the question to myself in my notes. I asked the question, explain to me how this is good for the guest, right? Because I feel like there should be some kind of benefit for the guest for any sort of decision that Disney makes. There has to be some sort of guest-facing decision. I don't see it here, so I can't see of any situation. Initially, I couldn't conceive of any situation like, yeah, this is good for the guests. This is definitely better. And this is irrespective of the whole reservation system thing. This is just strictly the dynamic pricing model. Never, because I know some people will say, I like the reservation system, makes me feel secure, makes me feel safe, it makes me know I can get into the park that day. That's a whole completely different conversation. Although we do, when you buy your ticket, you are also having to make a reservation. These are dated tickets. They are also for a specific date, like on Disneyland Paris, I should say. Those are dated tickets, but they can be changed, with ease. And nor do you even need to make a reservation. You're purchasing the ticket is the reservation. I digress. I don't believe this to be, purely speaking, a guest-friendly situation, but there are some exceptions. There are certain guests certain kinds of guests where this could be of benefit. Namely, that's the floor. This system creates a floor, a lower price that might not have existed otherwise. In terms of Disneyland Tier 0, the $106 price, $106 or $104, I don't remember. That price, if we did not have Tier 0 through Tier 6, that price would not exist. And the same is true here in this dynamic pricing model. Let's just say they went to a flat rate. They would have to try to accommodate for all dates into that one price. So rather than having a range from $106 to $200, they would probably set the price at about $160. Let's just say. I'm making that up, but it's kind of sounds logical. But the point is that if they were to get rid of the pricing model, if they were to get rid of the Tier 0 through Tier 6 pricing model or this dynamic pricing model, that $104 ticket would not exist. The minimum you would pay is probably something like $150 or $160. Every ticket would. Now, they would lose some on the high end, yes, but that's not of my concern. I don't care if they lose that $400, but it does give me, as a ticket-paying guest, an opportunity to buy a ticket for $106. They have to, if they were to flatten it, they would have to make a price that can consume all possible scenarios: slow days, medium days, and busy days. That's a win for the guest. That's a win for the guest. Now, it's not readily apparent. It's not readily obvious to a lot of people who are watching this show today because, I feel like ours is a diehard facing group. I feel like ours is a locals group perhaps, or somebody who's just not too overly concerned about that kind of thing. But for the smaller subset of guests or fans, they would appreciate the fact that they can buy a ticket for $104 rather than $160. Now, those dates there's not a lot of them, but it is opportunity. Another thing that it can do, what this calendar does, using that sort of color-coded base system, and that's why Disney uses the colors. Same thing for there's a calendar out there that's color-coded. This system on the Disneyland Paris website is color-coded. It gives you an easy way to set an expectation of whether or not it will be busy that day. People always ask, when do you think it will be busy at Disneyland? A person could say, well, look at this calendar. All those dates that are orange, look out. Do I have the right calendar? Let me see. Hold on. I'm going to pull up the Disneyland calendar. Yes, orange. Anywhere you see orange on that calendar, expect it to be busy. Anywhere where you see it green, expect it to be slow. That's the expectation. Somebody could use that as a identifier. If you don't want to go on a busy day, then you just look at that calendar and say, I think those are the days those are the right days for me. Now, the one thing I would say, the caveat to that, which sounds perfectly reasonable, right? You're like, everybody's nodding along. Okay, yeah, I kind of like that. I kind of dig that. But if you've been watching our show, if you've been watching our State of Reports for the past 3 years or so, you will know that there's a concept, that there's a phrase, a saying, an idea that Monday is the new Saturday. This pricing model has become so ingrained into our purchasing decisions, but about whether or not to go to the park, that the reverse has happened. The inverse is true of that statement, where you can say now, if you see an orange date, that's a slow day. That's probably going to be a slow day because they're priced so high. The price is so outrageous that people are like, nah, I'm not going that day. I don't want to go that day. I'm going to go find a day that's cheaper. So you go to the park on a green day, on a $140 day, and it's busy as hell because everybody's trying to, get those cheaper tickets. Now, this is not absolutely, proven. It's not 100% true. It's a trend. It's a likelihood that we have been observing for many years now. But I feel like it's pretty consistently true except for maybe these peak times like we're going through right now, Christmas, for example. But you find, let me go back to that calendar, you find an orange day in, October, probably not going to be too bad. Those first 3 days in January, probably not going to be too bad. Tier 5, pink, October, we've been there on those days, it was dead. You know what I mean? So you can kind of do an inverse game on that. So that's kind of a less trustworthy benefit. And then lastly, and this is probably the most valuable reason, early planners are rewarded. This system does reward people who plan well ahead. You're going to get, if you plan well ahead, you're going to get probably the lowest price available. There's an idea that, with the pricing model that once you book, maybe the price goes down. Like then what? Oh, now you're out X dollars. That's a possibility, but I'm less inclined to think that is. I don't think that Disney's algorithm is dumb enough. To be honest, I don't think it's dumb enough to not know that the price is, it's only going to go up. I feel like it's pretty rare that Disney says, we expect this to be a super busy day, and it just doesn't pan out. And even if it doesn't, I don't think they're going to lower the price. What they'll do instead is make other things more available, like magic keys or something like that. But again, I'm using a local filter for that. I got to be careful as opposed to thinking about it in terms of like what Disneyland Paris is doing. But if they do bring that, but I guess it is a valid observation, because if they do bring that to Disneyland, rather than lower the price, I think that they would probably just let in more magic key holders. And I think that actually sums up pretty much what's going to happen. This will happen, by the way, first of all. Hugh Johnston made this announcement. He's the CFO. He replaced Susan, I forget her name. He just got re-upped. He just got his contract extended. So if this was his idea, Disney's like, yes, we like it. And we like it so much that we're going to extend your contract. It does, though, I will say, I'm not crazy about it. Like I said, I get it. Capitalism, yay. But I would like there to be more benefit for the guest. I would like to see them do things that aren't just considered because of the bottom line and because of how it helps Disney's case financially, their bottom line. I want Disney to succeed. Don't get me wrong. I love it when the park is busy. I like it when Disney wins. I like it when their movies make a bunch of money. All that is true. I just want them to think about us more. I've said that before in different videos and in different ways. And this is not that. This is not that. This is not thinking about us at all. There's just very little, where I can look at this and say, hey, great job. I'm really happy that you're doing this. I mean, because but I'm thinking I'm an annual pass holder. I'm never going to buy a ticket for $104. I'm an annual pass holder, always have been. So I guess maybe my opinion doesn't matter in this conversation. But I would love to hear yours. I would love to hear what your opinion is of this. How much do you like? First of all, tell me what your airline experience is. Tell me about your experiences buying tickets for flights. Does that experience, has that jaded you on buying tickets? And does that concern you if they try to bring that over to buying Disneyland tickets? I would like to hear from you. Comments below. You guys know what to do. You know the drill. Stay tuned. We got more. We got more to talk about on this channel. Thanks for watching, everybody. We love you. Be safe out there. Be kind to one another. Fresh baked.